The wind cut through the empty street like a blade. Cold air carried the smell of wet stone and old garbage. The alien girl sat on the hard ground beside a cracked wall, her knees pulled to her chest. She had no clothes, only thin skin turning pale in the freezing night. Her arms were covered with bruises, and her lips trembled with each shallow breath. Every time footsteps came close, she tried to make herself smaller, but it never worked. Two alien merchants passed by, their heavy coats brushing against her bare feet. They looked at her once, then laughed and threw an empty food wrapper in her lap. She did not move, only kept her eyes on the ground. She had learned long ago that answering back brought pain. The stone beneath her was cold enough to bite into her bones. She felt as if the night itself wanted to freeze her alive. A shadow appeared at the far end of the street. It moved differently, steadier, more upright. The steps were heavy but even, like the person was not afraid of the darkness. The figure came closer, and the weak glow from the broken streetlight showed a human man. He carried a small bag on one shoulder and wore a thick new coat. His boots splashed in the puddles as he walked, but when his eyes caught sight of her, he stopped. The girl's heart pounded. Humans were rare in this city. She did not know if he was a threat or not. She tried to turn away, hiding her face behind her arms. The man did not speak. He just stood there for a moment, watching her shiver. Then, slowly, he walked closer. His boots made a soft crunch on the grit-covered ground. When he was near enough, he knelt beside her. The girl tensed, ready to run, but her legs felt too weak. She smelled something strange, warm like leather and a faint hint of smoke. He looked at her, not with disgust, not with mockery, but with a strange, quiet concern. Without a word, he pulled at the zipper of his coat, slid it off his shoulders, and held it out. She stared at it, not understanding. Her hands twitched in hesitation. No one gave anything here for free. Finally, he moved closer and gently draped the coat around her thin frame. The warmth was instant, almost shocking. It felt like fire after days of cold. She pulled it tighter without meaning to, her body curling into it, as if afraid it might be taken away. The man's voice was low. "You're freezing." She opened her mouth, but no words came. Her throat felt tight, and her breath made small clouds in the air. He looked at her feet, bare, red, and scraped from the rough stone. He frowned and reached into his bag, pulling out a small packet. It smelled of food. He placed it beside her and stood up. She thought he would leave. She was almost relieved. Kindness was dangerous. But before either of them could move, heavy footsteps echoed from behind. The man turned slightly, and she froze. Two tall figures stepped out of the shadows, both wearing dark armor that caught the streetlight. Their eyes were fixed on her. The taller one spoke in a deep, sharp voice in their alien tongue. "She's ours." The human stepped in front of her, his shoulders squared. The girl's pulse raced. She knew these men. They worked for the one who had thrown her into the street. Her body shook harder, not from the cold, but from fear. "You heard me, human," the armored alien said. "That thing belongs to us. Step aside." The man didn't move. His voice was calm but firm. "She's not yours." The shorter guard let out a slow, threatening laugh. "You think you can keep her? You don't know who you're dealing with." The girl wanted to speak, to tell the human to walk away before it was too late, but the words stuck in her throat. She gripped the edges of the coat as if it could shield her from everything. The taller alien stepped closer, his hand twitching near his weapon. The human took a slow step forward, blocking their view of her completely. "Walk away," he said. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. For a moment, she thought they would attack. Instead, the taller one smirked. "We'll be back, human, and when we return, you'll wish you'd never seen her." They turned and walked away, their armor clinking softly in the distance. The human stayed still until their footsteps faded. Then he looked back at her, his expression unreadable. "Come on," he said. She hesitated, glancing down the street where the armored men had gone. Something deep inside told her that if she stayed, they would come back before the night ended. Slowly, she stood. The coat felt heavier now, but in a way that made her feel safe. He started walking, and she followed, her bare feet whispering against the stone. Somewhere in the shadows, unseen eyes were watching. They walked in silence, the sound of his boots and her bare feet mixing with the faint hum of the city. The human kept glancing behind them, his eyes scanning the empty alleys. The girl pulled the coat tighter around herself. It still smelled faintly of leather and something she could not name, something that felt safe. At the corner of a narrow street, the human stopped. His hand came up, signaling her to stay close to the wall. She froze, her heart racing. Across the street, two alien figures stood under a dim light. They were not the same ones from before, but their armor carried the same dark emblem. They were talking quietly, their eyes shifting to anyone who passed. "They're looking for you." The human whispered without turning his head. Her throat tightened. "They won't stop," she said softly. "They can't let me go." "Why?" he asked. She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. If they find me, they'll take me back. And you." She stopped, glancing at him. "You'll be marked." The human didn't reply right away. His gaze moved between the guards and the path ahead. Then, without hesitation, he took her hand. "Come on." She flinched at the touch, but his grip was steady and warm. He led her into a side alley so narrow she had to turn sideways to fit through. The smell of damp stone and rotting cloth filled the air. Somewhere above, water dripped slowly from a broken pipe. When they reached the other end, the human stopped again. "How many will come after you?" She looked down. "As many as it takes. The one I belong to, he has power. No one says no to him." "You said no," the human replied. Her voice broke. "That's why I'm here like this." She gestured to her thin frame, the bruises on her arms. "They strip you, shame you, leave you in the cold so you'll beg to come back. And if you don't..." She trailed off, her eyes darkening. The human's jaw tightened. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small piece of bread. "Eat," he said. She hesitated, then took it. The bread was dry, but it was the first thing she had eaten in days. She chewed slowly, afraid it might be taken away. A sudden noise made them both turn, a metal can rolling across the cobblestone. The girl's body stiffened. From the shadows, the same two armored aliens from earlier stepped forward. The taller one grinned. "We told you, human. You can't keep her." The human shifted his stance, placing himself between them again. His voice stayed calm. "You're not taking her." "You think your little coat makes her yours?" The shorter one sneered. "She's marked property. There's a price on her head, and you just made it higher by touching her." The girl gripped the coat so tightly her knuckles turned white. She knew these men would drag her through the streets without mercy. She whispered, "Please, let them take me. If they hurt you, it will be worse." The human didn't even look back at her. "I'm not letting them." The taller alien stepped closer, his boots loud on the stone. "Last chance, human. Walk away." The human's hand twitched slightly, as if ready to reach for something in his bag. His voice was low but sharp. "No." A tense silence followed. The shorter alien let out a sharp laugh, but there was no humor in it. "Then hear this. You've just made yourself an enemy of the Bloodcrest clan. There's nowhere in this city you can hide." They turned and walked off. But their words hung in the air like a threat that would never fade. The human looked at the girl. "We can't stay out here." She nodded, still clutching the coat. They moved quickly now, weaving through alleys until the air grew damp and the streets quiet. He stopped before a rusted metal door and unlocked it. Inside was a small room lit by a single hanging lamp. There was a narrow bed, a cracked table, and a heater that hummed faintly. It wasn't much, but it was warmer than the streets. "Sit," he told her. She lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, her eyes scanning the room. It was the first place in a long time that didn't feel dangerous. He poured water from a jug into a cup and handed it to her. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Lyra." He nodded. "I'm Aaron." For a moment, there was silence, except for the soft hum of the heater. She wanted to ask why he was helping her, but she was afraid of the answer. Instead, she stared at the floor. Aaron moved to the window and looked outside. His eyes narrowed. "They're not giving up," he said quietly. Lyra's stomach turned. "What do you mean?" "They're already searching the streets. It's only a matter of time before they find this place." Her hands tightened around the cup. "Then you should let me go. If they catch me here, you'll be punished." He shook his head. "If I let you go, you'll die." She looked at him, searching for any sign of doubt, but his face was set. For the first time in years, someone wasn't telling her she was worthless. Outside, faint footsteps passed by the building. Lyra's breath caught. Aaron didn't move from the window, his body tense. Aaron kept his eyes on the street, his body still and alert. The footsteps outside slowed, then stopped. Lyra sat frozen on the bed, clutching the coat like a lifeline. Her breath came in shallow bursts, and every sound from beyond the thin walls felt louder than it should. A muffled voice spoke in the alien tongue, low and commanding. Another voice answered. Aaron glanced at her. "Stay quiet," he mouthed. The doorknob rattled. Lyra's stomach twisted. She pulled her feet up onto the bed, trying to make herself smaller. The rattling stopped, but then there was a hard knock, 3 times, heavy and deliberate. Aaron moved silently to the small table, slid open a drawer, and pulled out a short metal pipe. He gave one last look at the door, then at her. "If I say run, you run," he whispered. The knock came again, louder this time. Aaron didn't answer. After a long pause, the footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. He stayed at the window for a full minute before lowering the pipe. "They're checking every building," he said. Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper. "They'll come back." He nodded. "That's why we can't stay here long." She lowered her eyes. "I don't want you to die for me." "Too late," he said simply, as if the choice had already been made and could not be undone. They stayed inside until the street outside fell quiet. When the air felt still again, Aaron motioned for her to follow. He opened the back door, which led into a narrow service passage between buildings. The walls were damp and the smell of rust hung in the air. They moved quickly, their steps muffled by the uneven ground. Every few minutes, Aaron stopped to listen. Twice, they heard distant voices and stayed hidden until they faded away. The further they went, the darker the streets became. Lyra's legs ached and the cold bit at her bare feet, but she didn't complain. She knew every sound could give them away. Aaron led her to a crumbling stone stairway that descended beneath the street. A rusted gate blocked the entrance, but he pushed it open with a sharp creak. Below was an abandoned tunnel. The air was thick with dust, but it was warmer than outside. Their footsteps echoed softly as they walked. Faint graffiti and alien symbols covered the walls, warnings from gangs who once used the place. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere they won't look right away," Aaron replied. "But we need to move fast. The Bloodcrest clan doesn't stop." She knew he was right. The clan's reach stretched far. If they wanted someone, they would hunt for days, weeks, even months until they had them. She wrapped the coat tighter, feeling the faint beat of her heart in her ears. After what felt like hours, they reached a rusted ladder. Aaron climbed first, then helped her up. They emerged into an alley behind an old storage yard filled with metal crates. Aaron checked the street beyond the yard before leading her toward a squat brick building with boarded windows. Inside, the air was stale. Dust floated in the beam of light coming through a gap in the boards. There were no chairs, no bed, only a few broken crates in the corner. Aaron shut the door and leaned against it. "This will do for tonight," he said. Lyra sank onto one of the crates, her muscles aching. "Tomorrow, they'll still be looking," she murmured. "I know," Aaron said. "That's why tomorrow we move again. But I need to know something, Lyra. Why are they so desperate to get you back?" Her fingers tightened around the coat. "I was promised to someone, a man with power, one of their leaders. I refused him. That was my crime." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "And they punish you like this?" "They punish anyone who shames them," she said. "And if they can't break you, they kill you." Silence settled between them. Outside, a faint howl of wind passed through the narrow streets. Aaron finally spoke. "Then we have to get you out of the city." She looked up at him, surprised. "You'd do that? For me?" "I'm already in this," he said. "Might as well finish the job." Lyra felt something strange, something she hadn't felt in a long time. A spark of hope. But it was fragile, like a candle in a storm. Their quiet moment was broken by a sudden thud outside. Aaron moved to the window, peering through the small gap. He saw shadows moving between the crates in the yard. 3 figures, all armored. "They found us," he said in a low voice. Lyra's blood ran cold. "What do we do?" Aaron picked up a length of pipe lying on the floor and handed her a small rusty knife he'd found earlier. "We get out the back." They slipped through a narrow opening in the rear wall and found themselves in another alley. But the moment they stepped out, voices shouted from behind. "Run!" Aaron barked. They sprinted down the alley, their footsteps pounding against the stone. The cold air burned Lyra's lungs, but she kept going, clutching the coat with one hand and the knife with the other. The shouts grew louder, the sound of boots closing in. Ahead, the alley split in 2. Aaron glanced left, then right, then chose the darker path. They pushed forward until the noise behind them began to fade. Only when they were sure they weren't being followed did they stop, breathing hard. Aaron leaned against the wall, scanning the shadows. "We can't keep running like this," he said. Lyra swallowed hard. "Then where?" He looked at her with steady eyes. "Somewhere they'll never think to look. Somewhere you can be free." Her heart pounded. "Where is that?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Outside the walls." Aaron kept his voice low as they moved through the maze of back streets. The night air was sharper here, the smell of burning fuel mixing with damp stone. Lyra followed close behind, her bare feet aching, but the thought of the Bloodcrest clan finding them kept her silent. Every shadow felt alive, and every sound made her flinch. They passed rows of shuttered shops and crumbling homes until they reached a part of the city where the streetlights were broken. Only the faint glow of distant towers touched the ground. Aaron stopped at a corner, scanning the area before motioning her toward an abandoned market. Inside, the stalls were covered in dust and cobwebs. "This is where we rest for now," he said quietly. Lyra's eyes darted to the open doorways. "They'll find us anywhere." Aaron pulled a piece of cloth from his bag and draped it over a small gap in the wall where cold air leaked in. "Not tonight," he replied. "We'll keep moving at first light." She sat on a wooden crate, wrapping the coat tightly around herself. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the faint drip of water somewhere in the market. Aaron crouched nearby, pulling out a small canister and lighting a short flame. Its glow painted the walls in orange, and for the first time, Lyra felt a touch of warmth. She watched him work in silence until curiosity overcame fear. "Why are you helping me?" Aaron didn't look up. "Because no one else will." "That's not a reason," she said softly. He glanced at her then, his eyes steady. "It's the only reason I need." Before she could answer, a faint sound reached them. Boots on stone, growing louder. Lyra's heart leapt into her throat. Aaron extinguished the flame with a quick motion and pressed a finger to his lips. They both stayed still, listening. The steps passed outside, slow and deliberate. Aaron waited until the sound faded before speaking. "They're widening the search. We need to be careful." "How will we get out?" she whispered. "There's an old supply route," he said. "It runs under the outer walls. If it's still clear, it's our way out." She frowned. "And if it's not clear, then we find another way." The thought of leaving the city stirred something inside her, a dangerous mix of hope and fear. She had never been beyond the walls. The Bloodcrest clan had kept her locked in their part of the city since she was a child. The world outside was only a story to her, one she had never dared to believe in. Aaron rose to his feet and checked the small gap in the wall. "We should move before they circle back." They slipped out into the night, keeping close to the shadows. The streets here were narrow, hemmed in by tall, leaning buildings that seemed ready to collapse. A rat darted across their path, disappearing into a drain. Lyra kept her eyes on the back of Aaron's coat, focusing on each step to keep fear from taking over. As they neared the supply route, the city's noise faded into a strange, heavy quiet. The stone road gave way to cracked concrete, and the buildings looked older, abandoned long before she was born. Aaron led her to a rusted gate, half buried in rubble. "This is it," he said, pushing the gate open with a loud creak. The passage beyond was low and damp, the air heavy with the smell of earth and rusted metal. They moved carefully, the sound of dripping water echoing in the darkness. Lyra's hand brushed the wall as she walked. "Why is this here?" "It was for moving goods out of the city during the war," Aaron said. "But it's been sealed for years." They followed the tunnel until they reached a fork. One path was blocked by fallen stone, the other open but filled with shadows. Aaron chose the open one. The ground sloped downward, and soon they were wading through ankle-deep water. After several minutes, the faint sound of voices stopped them in their tracks. Aaron held up a hand, signaling her to stay quiet. They pressed against the wall as 3 alien guards appeared ahead, their lanterns casting long beams through the dark. Aaron leaned close to her ear. "If they see us, we're trapped." Her breath caught. She could hear the guards speaking in low tones, their steps slow and careless. One stopped to check the wall, while the others kept moving. Aaron waited until they were just far enough before pulling her forward silently, keeping close to the opposite side of the tunnel. They slipped past without a sound, the shadows hiding them until the lantern light faded behind them. Only then did Lyra let out the breath she'd been holding. They walked for what felt like hours, the tunnel twisting and narrowing until it ended at a heavy metal door. Aaron tried the handle. It was locked. "No," Lyra whispered, panic rising. He crouched, pulling a small tool from his bag. "It's old," he said. "I can open it." The scraping of metal on metal seemed deafening in the stillness. Lyra kept watch, her heart pounding with each second. At last, there was a click, and Aaron pushed the door open. Cold night air rushed in, carrying the scent of wet grass and earth. Lyra stepped outside and froze. The city wall loomed behind them, its dark shape cutting the sky. In front of them stretched the open land, wide, silent, and unknown. Aaron closed the door and looked at her. "We're not safe yet, but we're closer." She tightened the coat around her shoulders and nodded. For the first time in her life, the city was behind her. But she knew the Bloodcrest clan would not give up so easily. The ground outside the walls was uneven and damp, covered in patches of wild grass and scattered stones. The night was quiet here, almost too quiet, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Lyra followed close to Aaron, her bare feet sinking into the cold earth. Every step felt strange. She had never walked beyond the city before. The air was cleaner, sharper, and the stars above seemed brighter than she had ever seen. Aaron moved with purpose, glancing back every few steps to make sure she was still close. "We keep moving until sunrise," he said quietly. "Once the light comes, we'll find a place to hide." She nodded, clutching the coat tighter around her. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft rustle of the grass. But in the distance, a faint sound began to grow, a low hum that didn't belong to the night. Lyra's stomach tightened. "They're coming," she whispered. Aaron's head turned slightly. He heard it too. Without another word, he grabbed her hand and led her toward a slope that dipped into a shallow valley. The hum grew louder, joined by the faint thud of heavy boots. Torches flared along the wall behind them, throwing moving beams of light across the open ground. "They've already noticed we're gone," Aaron muttered. They ran, their shadows stretching long across the grass. The slope leveled out into a narrow strip of land surrounded by tall reeds. Aaron slowed, pulling her into the cover. The reeds swayed gently in the cold wind, hiding them from view. "Stay low," he said. Through the thin gaps in the plants, Lyra saw figures moving along the top of the wall. More lights appeared, sweeping over the open fields. The hum in the air shifted into the sharp whine of engines. Small patrol craft were being launched. Aaron's jaw tightened. "We can't stay here long. Once those crafts pass over, they'll see us." "Where will we go?" she asked, her voice trembling. He scanned the dark horizon. "There's a forest about 3 miles from here. If we make it there before they spot us, we'll have a chance." The wind carried the faint roar of engines closer. Aaron waited until the nearest light swept past, then pulled her forward again. They moved quickly, crouched low, using the uneven ground as cover. The cold cut into her feet and legs, but fear pushed her onward. Halfway to the forest, a bright beam of light sliced across the field. Aaron yanked her down into a shallow ditch just as the sound of a craft passed overhead. The grass bent under the force of the wind from its engines. "They're scanning," Aaron whispered. They stayed still until the sound faded, then climbed out of the ditch and started moving again. The dark outline of the forest was getting closer, but so were the voices behind them. By the time they reached the first line of trees, Lyra's breath was ragged and her legs burned. The forest smelled of damp soil and moss, its floor littered with fallen leaves. Aaron led her deeper inside, choosing paths where the branches above blocked most of the moonlight. When they were far enough in, he stopped beside a fallen tree. "Rest for a moment," he said. Lyra sank onto the trunk, still holding the coat tightly around her. "They'll keep looking," she said. "Yes," Aaron replied. "But here we have cover. They won't move as fast in the forest." For a moment, the only sound was the whisper of leaves in the wind. But then, faintly, she heard it, the distant bark of a signal horn. Her chest tightened. "They know we're here," she said. Aaron's eyes narrowed. "Then we keep moving." They pushed on, weaving through the trees. The forest floor was uneven, with roots twisting up from the ground and patches of mud that sucked at their feet. More than once, Aaron had to pull her forward when she stumbled. Hours seemed to pass before the sound of the horn faded. Finally, they stopped near a large rock formation. The stones created a small sheltered space beneath them, hidden from view unless someone stood directly above. "This will do for now," Aaron said. Lyra crawled inside, curling up in the coat. Her body ached, but her mind wouldn't rest. "Aaron," she said softly, "what if they catch us?" "Then I make sure they don't take you alive," he said without hesitation. She looked at him, her heart pounding. "Why risk so much for me?" He met her gaze. "Because I know what it's like to be hunted, and because you deserve more than what they gave you." Her throat felt tight. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She turned her face into the coat to hide the tears forming in her eyes. Aaron stayed at the entrance of the shelter, keeping watch. The forest was quiet again, but he didn't relax. Somewhere out there, he knew the Bloodcrest clan was still hunting, and they would not stop until one of them was dead. The forest was darker now, the sky hidden by a thick blanket of clouds. The cold had deepened, making every breath visible in the air. Lyra lay curled in the shelter beneath the rocks, but her eyes stayed open. Every creak of wood and rustle of leaves made her tense. Aaron sat just outside the entrance, his back against the stone, holding a small metal blade across his lap. A faint sound reached them, slow footsteps, heavy enough to break twigs underfoot. Aaron's head turned slightly, his eyes narrowing. Lyra froze, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure whoever was out there could hear it. The footsteps stopped. The forest went still. Then a voice spoke from the darkness, low and mocking. "Human, you can't hide her forever." Aaron gripped the blade tighter. "Keep your voice down," he murmured to Lyra without looking back. The unseen figure laughed softly. Then the footsteps resumed, circling somewhere in the trees. Lyra pressed her hands to her mouth to keep from making a sound. Minutes passed before the forest grew quiet again. Aaron stayed where he was, listening, his jaw tight. "They're trying to scare us," he whispered, "but they don't know exactly where we are." Lyra's voice was trembling. "For how long?" "Not long," he admitted. When the silence stretched, Aaron finally turned to her. "We move now. Staying means getting trapped." She nodded, forcing her legs to carry her out from under the rocks. The forest floor was slick with wet leaves, and the cold made her limbs feel heavy. Aaron kept them moving in a zigzag path, never going straight for too long. They walked for what felt like hours until the ground began to rise. The slope ahead was covered in thick roots and moss. Aaron led the way, pulling her up when she slipped. At the top, the forest opened into a narrow ridge. From there, Lyra could see a faint glimmer of light far in the distance. "What is that?" she asked. "A trade outpost," Aaron said. "If we reach it, we can get food, maybe transport." Her heart lifted for a moment, but then she saw movement in the shadows below the ridge. Figures, at least 4, were moving quickly through the trees in their direction. "They found us," she whispered. Aaron scanned the slope and pointed toward a cluster of boulders. "Down there." They slid and stumbled down the other side of the ridge, landing hard on damp soil. Aaron pulled her behind the largest boulder just as the sound of voices carried over the ridge. "They're tracking us," Lyra said, her breathing uneven. "They're following my tracks," Aaron replied. "So we'll give them more than one trail to follow." He picked up a fallen branch and began dragging it in the dirt, creating false paths leading away from the boulders. Lyra watched him work quickly and silently. When he returned, he motioned for her to follow another route, stepping only where he stepped to hide their trail. The night dragged on as they moved deeper into the forest. Lyra's feet were numb, and her arms ached from holding the coat tightly around her. Her thoughts drifted to the days before Aaron found her, days of cold, hunger, and humiliation. She didn't know why this human had decided to protect her, but every moment they stayed alive felt like proof that she wasn't completely lost. The sound of running water reached them. Soon they came to a small stream cutting through the forest. Aaron crouched down, washing the mud from his hands. "We follow the stream for a while. The water will hide our tracks." They stepped into the icy current, the cold biting at their skin, and began moving along the stream bed. The sound of water rushing over stones masked their steps, giving them a strange sense of safety. After a long while, Aaron stopped and pointed toward a cluster of trees leaning over the bank. Beneath their roots was a hollow space just large enough for them to squeeze into. "We'll rest here," he said. Lyra crawled inside, sitting with her knees pulled to her chest. Aaron stayed near the entrance, listening to the forest. The stream's steady sound was calming, but he didn't let his guard down. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, his eyes steady. "Yes, but only if we keep moving when the time comes." She studied his face in the dim light filtering through the roots. He looked tired but unshaken, as if nothing could make him give up. They stayed there until the first faint light of dawn touched the sky. Aaron gave her a small piece of dried food from his bag, then motioned for her to follow. The forest looked different in daylight, less like a trap and more like a path forward. But as they began walking again, Lyra spotted something in the mud near the stream, a mark burned into the earth, shaped like the Bloodcrest clan's emblem. It was fresh. Aaron saw it too. "They're closer than I thought," he said grimly. The distant crack of a branch echoed through the trees, followed by voices. Lyra's pulse quickened. Aaron reached for her hand. "Run!" They took off through the forest, dodging branches and leaping over roots. The voices behind them grew louder, the hunt closing in once again. The forest blurred around them as they ran, branches whipping against their faces and leaves crunching underfoot. Lyra's lungs burned, but she didn't let go of Aaron's hand. The shouts behind them were getting closer, the Bloodcrest hunters crashing through the undergrowth like predators closing in on prey. Aaron veered sharply to the right, pulling her toward a cluster of thick trees. "This way," he said, his voice low but urgent. They pushed through the dense brush until they reached a steep drop. Below, a narrow river cut through the forest, its water dark and fast-moving. "They won't follow us if we take the river," Aaron said. Lyra looked down, her stomach twisting. "We'll be swept away." "Better than caught," he replied. Without giving her time to think, he tightened his grip on her hand and jumped. The cold hit like a wall, knocking the breath from her lungs. The current seized them instantly, pulling them downstream. She kicked desperately to keep her head above water, the coat heavy on her shoulders. Aaron's hand never left hers, guiding her toward the far bank. They crawled out onto the muddy shore, dripping and shivering. Aaron glanced back at the opposite bank. No movement. The voices had faded. "They'll have to find another crossing," he said between breaths. Lyra's teeth chattered. "Where now?" Aaron scanned the trees ahead. "We keep moving until we find shelter. Once the sun's up, they'll send scouts in every direction." The forest here was thicker, the trees taller. They walked in silence, their soaked clothes heavy and cold. Lyra's legs trembled with every step, but she forced herself to keep going. She didn't want to be the reason they slowed down. After some time, the ground began to slope upward. At the top of the rise, Aaron stopped. Below them was a small clearing with the remains of an old cabin, its roof half collapsed but its stone walls still standing. "It'll do," he said. Inside, the air was musty and stale, but the cabin offered shelter from the wind. Aaron found a broken chair and tore off strips of wood, stacking them in the old fireplace. With flint from his bag, he sparked a small flame to life. The warmth spread slowly, chasing away the worst of the cold. Lyra sat close to the fire, holding her hands out to the heat. "I thought we'd never stop running?" "No," she said quietly. Aaron looked at her. "We'll stop for real when we're far enough that they give up." She met his gaze. "They never give up." He didn't argue, but she saw the shadow in his eyes. They shared a small piece of dried food, chewing in silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the loose boards on the roof. Every sound made Lyra tense, but Aaron seemed calm, always listening. When the fire had burned low, he stood. "I'm going to check the area." Fear sparked in her chest. "Don't leave me here." "I won't be far," he promised. While he was gone, Lyra pulled the coat tighter and tried to push away the images in her mind. Cold streets, mocking voices, the hands that had dragged her away in the past. She thought of how Aaron had stood between her and the Bloodcrest hunters every time, never stepping aside. A noise at the door made her freeze. She turned, expecting Aaron, but instead saw a shadow move across the gap. Before she could cry out, the door creaked open. A Bloodcrest hunter stepped inside, his armor dull in the dim light. His gaze locked on her, and a cruel smile spread across his face. "Found you," he said. Lyra backed away, her heart racing. She grabbed a piece of burning wood from the fire, holding it like a weapon. The hunter took a step forward, and then Aaron was there, slamming into him from the side. They crashed to the floor, the hunter's weapon skittering across the stones. Aaron drove his elbow into the alien's throat, then wrenched his arm until a sharp crack filled the air. The hunter went limp. Aaron dragged the body outside, his breathing hard. When he returned, he looked at her. "We have to leave now. They're close." The firelight caught the determination in his eyes. Lyra nodded, standing despite her shaking legs. They slipped back into the forest, moving quickly. Dawn was beginning to touch the horizon, the faint light casting long shadows. In the distance, the sound of more voices carried through the trees. Aaron led her toward a narrow animal trail that twisted between rocks and thick roots. It was harder to follow, which meant it might buy them time. Lyra stumbled once, but Aaron caught her before she fell. Finally, the trees thinned, revealing a wide stretch of open land beyond. Far off, she could see small shapes moving, trading caravans heading toward the borderlands. Aaron's voice was steady. "If we reach them, they can get us out." Her chest tightened. "And if they don't help? Then we keep going," he said. They stepped out of the forest, the cold wind sweeping over them. Behind them, the hunt was still alive, but the world ahead was open. Lyra glanced at Aaron, and for the first time since the night she met him, she let herself believe they might actually be free.